Well, so this is on the eve of April Fool's Day, so I'd like to share a reflection in that spirit. First, this is from a friend of mine named Bert Newton, who shared these with on his blog, on his, I'm sorry, not blog, podcast. So first, I'd like to share with you a paraphrase of the Gospel by James Martin, a Jesuit priest. And his dynamic paraphrase really makes the text come alive in a way that gets right to the heart of the matter. So here's the story. You may have heard it before, but this is a new paraphrase. As Jesus was setting out on a journey, a man ran into him and knelt before him and asked, "Good teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said to him, "What have you done so far?" And he said to him, "Well, I was born into a wealthy family, got into a good school in Galilee because my parents donated a few thousand talents for a building that was with a nice reed roof. And now I have a high-paying job in the Roman treasury managing risk." Looking at him, Jesus felt admiration and said, "Blessed are you, for you're not far from being independently wealthy." And the man was happy. Then Jesus said, "But there's one thing you lack, a bigger house in a gated community in Tiberias. Buy that and you will have treasure indeed. And make sure you get a stone countertop for the kitchen. They're really nice." The disciples were amazed. Peter said, "Lord, shouldn't he sell all his possessions and give it to the poor?" Jesus grew angry. "Get behind me, Satan. He has earned it." Peter protested. "Lord," he said, "did this man not have an unjust advantage? What about those who are not born into wealthy families or do not have the benefit of a good education, or who, despite their toil, live in the poorest areas of Galilee like Nazareth, your hometown?" "Well," said Jesus, "first of all, that's why I left Nazareth. There are too many poor people always asking me for charity. They were so numerous as the stars in the sky, and they annoyed me. Second, once people start spending again, like this rich young man, the Galilean economy will inevitably rebound, and eventually some of it will trickle down to the poor. Blessed are the patient. But giving money away, especially if you can't write it off, is a big fat waste." The disciples' amazement knew no bounds. "But Lord," they said, "what about the passages in both the law and the prophets that tell us to care for widows and orphans, for the poor, the sick, and the refugees? What about the many passages in the scripture about justice?" "Those are just metaphors," said Jesus. "Don't take everything so literally." So maybe this isn't exactly what Jesus intended, but I'd like to share with you something that actually did occur. On December 3rd, 2004, Jude Finisterra, spokesperson for Dow Chemical, the new owner of Union Carbide, appeared on BBC World to announce Dow's plan to liquidate Union Carbide to raise $12 billion to compensate the victims of the 1984 Union Carbide disaster gas leak in Bhopal, India. In 1984, a Union Carbide plant in Bhopal suffered a massive leak, which exposed hundreds of thousands of people to toxic gases. The official immediate death toll was 2,259, but estimates are that upwards of 16,000 people eventually died and over 500,000 suffered injuries, many of them permanently disabling. For 20 years, little had been done to compensate the victims of that disaster, but now Finisterra proclaimed on BBC World Dow would use the $12 billion from liquidation of Union Carbide to pay the ongoing medical bills of 120,000 people who would need medical care for the rest of their lives. In addition, he said that Dow would also clean up the disaster in Bhopal and release the full information on the chemicals that had leaked into the community, two things that Union Carbide had never done. And on top of that, Finisterra declared, Dow would also pressure the U.S. government to extradite Warren Anderson, the CEO of Union Carbide, in 1984 to India to face charges for manslaughter. Finisterra optimistically predicted that although the shareholders of Dow stock would take a hit, they would be proud of the massive compensation plan for people in Bhopal because it was the right thing to do. And as a result of Finisterra's announcement, Dow stock plummeted by $2 billion. But then Dow issued a retraction. Well, it wasn't exactly a retraction because Dow had not sent Fenestra to make that announcement on BBC World in the first place. In fact, the man making the compensation announcement on BBC World was not really Jude Fenestra. His real name was Andy Bitchblom, a member of the prankster group called the Yes Men.
Yes Men.
All right, you know the Yes Men. They've been pulling these sort of pranks for 20 years, and they often masquerade as spokespersons for large corporations. So I think that's probably enough. I think that's one of the best April Fool's events that have happened.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Anthony.
Okay.
If I can just say, Anthony, that was great. And people here, if you have not seen the documentary on the Yes Men, please take some time to go do that. It's amazing what being right and being able to make fun of people who are making are getting a financial windfall from being wrong can do. I think as progressives, we use sarcasm and shame very a lot less than we should. So please check out that Yes Men documentary. I'll try and put a link in there in the chat.
Good.
Well, I don't have her full bio in front of me, but as you've heard, Denise has been a card-carrying member of ICUJP from the start, a terrific activist. Together, we've organized events in Santa Monica and elsewhere to recognize the terrible threat of nuclear weapons. That threat goes on and is being expanded. Denise, I hope you'll weave into your remarks some of the personal aspects that have brought you to this work, and we're just thrilled to have you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. All right, so I'm going to begin here talking about Back from the Brink, bringing communities together to abolish nuclear weapons. And this is just a collage of some of our work. You'll see over here in the right, our Los Angeles Coalition. And I know Carol Francis, you're in this picture somewhere, but I will get to that in a little bit. So I also want to say Happy Cesar Chavez Day. That is today, and little known fact, but he did speak out on nuclear weapons back in the day. Including going to demonstrations, getting arrested, and this photo here, 85,000 people in the Rose Bowl for nuclear disarmament. I would love to get those numbers again, but the world has changed, and we got to adapt and move with it. The nuclear threat today, it is a time of unprecedented danger. Given the war in Ukraine and the threats that have been made there, rising tensions with China, a new global arms race is underway. And for these and other reasons, Bulletin of Atomic Scientists this year did move the hand on the allegorical doomsday clock to 90 seconds before midnight, which is closer than even the height of the Cold War. And yet, we face many, many challenges on building a movement to get rid of these weapons and to have other policies that reduce the nuclear threat. Here's just a handful of ones that I think are key challenges that this campaign Back from the Brink is trying to address. One is that many folks aren't aware of the danger. Folks who are concerned don't really think that there's a way that can make a difference. They're not altogether wrong in the sense that nuclear weapons policy is less democratic than other policies in terms of the way the public can weigh in, but we do and we can, and particularly with members of Congress who can influence the executive branch. Despite numerous intersections with health, environmental justice, climate justice, racial justice, and democracy, this movement still remains siloed away from other justice movements. Our activists are largely older and white, and as a result of us not being connected with other movements and lacking diversity of all kinds, we have little power. And so what this campaign is intending to do is to build power. Our federal representatives aren't going to act on this unless their constituents demand it. And many of them still believe in the myth of deterrence. Yet most of the advocacy on nuclear disarmament really takes place in DC. It's led by Beltway groups who many of them are very good, but they don't have grassroots networks that can actually bring constituent members to bear, that can bring pressure to bear on Congress members. And that is why another sort of phrase that we're saying back from the brink is that nuclear weapons are a local issue. They're a local issue for a whole host of reasons. But one of the biggest ones is that that's where we can influence change, actually. What is Back from the Brink? Back from the Brink, bringing communities together to abolish nuclear weapons, is a US-based grassroots coalition of individuals, organizations, and elected officials working together for a world free of nuclear weapons and advocating for common sense policy solutions to secure a safer and more just future. We used to be called, Back from the Brink, the Call to Prevent Nuclear War, but after a couple of years into it, we realized that what we were actually doing and where our strength lay was in this power building, was bringing communities together. So we changed our tagline. We call for a set of common sense policy solutions, asking the United States to lead a global effort. Our policy platform is calling on the US to actively pursue a verifiable agreement among nuclear armed states to eliminate their arsenals, to renounce the option of using nuclear weapons first, to end the sole unchecked authority of any US president to launch a nuclear attack, to take US nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert, and to cancel plans to replace the entire US nuclear arsenal with enhanced weapons. We do this through community organizing throughout the country. And so here's just a collage of folks, small towns. This is, I think, Northampton, Massachusetts. We've got Baltimore, Los Angeles, other major cities that have passed resolutions, and I'll get to that in a moment. But really, we are doing this through community organizing, and a big focus of that is on getting municipalities and counties and states to endorse Back from the Brink through a resolution process. When we do that, like we did in Los Angeles in 2018, it becomes an organizing vehicle to reach out to other groups to support the resolution effort. That also makes it an educational tool. And then we have many now mayors, city councilors, and state legislators throughout the country who want to do more on this issue, who want to use their platform to speak out on nuclear weapons. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. So far, we have over 440 organizations of all kinds that have endorsed the campaign, and to the resolutions in states, over 75. And again, Los Angeles, I can't overstate the role that Los Angeles resolution played in this. Baltimore had come on before as the first major city, but after LA joined, it became a lot easier for other cities and other communities to get resolutions passed. And we're talking about, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Salt Lake City, Washington, DC, Tucson, Honolulu, major cities. And all of these resolutions are then sent to the congressional delegation. And then that becomes an advocacy tool for elected officials, for community members. When we met with Judy Chu a few weeks ago, Ed Fisher was there, did a fantastic job regarding a congressional resolution that I'll be talking about in a moment. We were able to tell her these groups in Southern California, the city of Los Angeles, the state of California supports these policy positions. And that makes a difference. It's one thing to say, to quote public opinion polls, but when you can say to a member of Congress, these cities in your district, these leaders in your district, these organizations in your district, all want you to take bold action on nuclear weapons policy. And in this case, our major ask is asking folks to co-sponsor this HRS 77, which I'll be talking about in a moment. The other thing that happened as a result of our Los Angeles resolution was that ICAN, which is the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, decided that it wanted to launch a similar effort called the Cities Appeal for cities worldwide. And hundreds of cities, I don't know the number now, worldwide have now joined on, calling on their country to embrace the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So most of the US cities that are now part of the cities appeal came back from the Brink resolutions. And here we've got this Beatrice Finn with former Councilmember Paul Koretz coming just to thank him when she was doing some advocacy work. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was adopted in 2017. 2/3 of the world's countries, 122 nations, voted to support it. It's now been ratified by over 60. Of course, the nuclear armed states have not signed on, and the US in particular is very vocal in trying to block it, even block other countries from joining. The treaty bans nuclear weapons in the same way that biological weapons, chemical weapons, cluster munitions, landmines are all banned. Nuclear weapons right now are the only indiscriminate weapon of war that is not banned by international treaty. So this, connecting back from the Brink's work in the US is also meant to build support for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I mentioned that we have local and state officials who have signed on. This used to be my video is not working. Anyway, we have over 330 now who have put their name on paper, and many of them have said they want to do more. And we are trying to work with them on things like joint op-eds, letters to the editor, maybe having, town hall forums specifically on this issue. So that is, and in 2021, we did submit a letter to Biden ahead of the nuclear posture review. One of the other things that Back from the Brink is really trying to do consciously, deliberately, is to really find common cause with other social justice movements, whether we're talking about the environmental health impacts, the health impacts of nuclear weapons, environmental justice from uranium mining down to the test victims of nuclear weapons testing, to the contamination that exists around nuclear weapons production and waste facilities, to the experiments that were done on African Americans in the 60s, the Marshallese communities, who of course their communities were devastated by all of the H-bomb tests. And many have come to the United States and still are not included in some key compensation programs. And then of course, there's the financial cost, the money that we spend on these weapons, the diverse resources from things that provide true human security, healthcare, education, environmental protection, all of these things. So last summer, we joined forces with the Poor People's Campaign, and we're a mobilizing partner for the demonstration they had in Washington, D.C. And it was just a fantastic event. And we're going to continue to try to work now as we build out our state work with the state committees. We also have tried to connect this issue to the issues of democracy in multiple ways. One, just the fact that a small group of men really have the power over whether we all live or die, and nuclear weapons policy is often shielded from public participation. But also, if we don't have a functional democracy, we will not be able to weigh in on nuclear weapons policy. So this was, of course, right before the election, really trying to do some voter education outreach prior to that election, and had a really powerful webinar about that. And then also in the finding cause of cause is right here is working with the interfaith communities. We had a convening with Archbishop Wester of Santa Fe last year. We, Sister Diane is on the call, I know. We participated in the 50th anniversary conference. We have another interfaith effort that I think was being planned for the fall. And it's just, it is incredibly powerful because of all of the arguments against nuclear weapons. I don't know that there's one that's more powerful than the moral argument. It is wrong to even threaten the mass murder of millions of people and to use these weapons to bully other countries into submission. And then the money spent on it also wrong, and the devastation to our health and environment. Our major focus right now, in addition to the municipal resolutions now, is a new congressional resolution that was introduced in January by Representative Jim McGovern and Earl Blumenauer, HRES 77. It is embracing the goals and the provisions of the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And it very specifically calls on the United States to calls on the president to embrace the goals and provision of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. But then it calls on all of us to lead a global effort to prevent nuclear war. And in this case, our policy position of securing an agreement among nuclear armed states to eliminate their arsenals, McGovern's office really wanted to make that very specific, given that the conflict we have right now in Ukraine. So sort of the meat of this, the policy that is, I think, most urgent right now is to actively pursue and conclude negotiations on a new bilateral nuclear arms and disarmament framework with Russia before 2026, which is when the New START agreement expires, and then also pursuing negotiations with China and the other nuclear armed states for verifiable, enforceable, and time-bound elimination of global nuclear arsenals. One thing, when we met with Judy Chu about this issue, we were able to see where there was another resolution, HRS 54, and many other statements about supporting the ultimate elimination of nuclear weapons. President Biden, even before the really terrible nuclear posture review was released, said until we have ultimately we want a world without nuclear weapons. And our sort of response is, if you ultimately want a world without nuclear weapons, then we need to start the agreements now. And why are we building more? So anyone who's gone on record, which is again all the way up to the president of the United States, saying they ultimately want to see this, well, we need to get cracking now. We did an organizational sign-on letter signed on by 154 organizations. ICUJP was one of them, I'm happy to say. And we have been delivering that to Congress, to House members, both via email, in lobby meetings. And then this is Madison Rose, who's back from the Brink, and the Union of Concerned Scientists, who is going door to door in Congress delivering the letters. We have 12 co-sponsors so far, so a lot of work to go. We do have a resources page on our website about how to take action on HRS 77, from a simple, click and send message to how to call, writing letters to the editor, sharing on social media. The effort that I want to be leading and working with you all on will be actual in-district visits, more like what we were able to do with Jody Chu a few weeks ago. California is hugely important in this effort. We understand that HRS 77 is not going to become law in the 108th Congress. It is a tool to build congressional champions on this issue. Back in the day, and I was not there, but back in the day, the freeze movement, there were Congress members who made this their issue, who took it on, who talked about it regularly, who were true champions. And even though we have some representatives who will sign on, who will co-sponsor, we need true champions. And so this resolution is a vehicle to be able to have a meeting with a congressperson, talk about the amount of support throughout the United States, the cities that have passed resolutions, the communities that are joining on, the kinds of organizations that are now supporting this work, and urge them to speak out more. And so, just because a representative co-sponsors HRS 77 does not make them a champion. So that work must continue. We'll want to pursue resolutions in Representative Chu's district. We'll want to thank her. When this letter, we sent it to her with a thank you, to continue to just keep that drumbeat going, that there are constituents that want, in fact, demand action on this issue. Other ways to get involved, endorsing the campaign, and asking others to endorse the campaign as well. Organizing municipal resolution efforts. I do think that Alon Friedman, who helped with the Judy Chu, is looking at Sierra Madre now for a resolution. So we're also trying to pursue one in Sacramento. So that's going to be another. And I think given the Senate race in California, we're going to, I think, really try to target resolutions in the districts of Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, and Barbara Lee, she's actually already signed on as a co-sponsor for HRS 77. We have local organizing meetups every third Tuesday of the month. We have social media that folks can follow. We also started this last year to have sort of different tiers of engagement for organizations and individuals. We have now, I think, 15 hubs throughout the country, which are sort of self-sustained local groups of people working on back from the Brink efforts in their community. The distributed organizing model is what it's called. And we're just really, this is our first year doing that. And then we also have another layer for organizations to become a coalition partner. And that just means that you will, organizations will, regularly communicate about this issue to their members. When we have action alerts, put them out there. And I think we have 12 organizational coalition partners right now. The website has an easy link under take action for endorsing. I already did this one. So sorry, repetitive slides. In terms of municipal efforts, whether that's getting a local elected official or an entire city or a municipality to adopt a back from the Brink resolution, we have sample resolutions and guides on our website on our advocacy tools page. I also wanted to call out another page on the website that does talk more about how nuclear weapons intersect with other issues, health and the environment, with racial justice, climate change, and morality and ethics. And so there's each one of these things, if you click it, it moves down and there's more information there that can be helpful in outreach to other folks. Of course, we do fundraising too, and have this really groovy t-shirt. And that wraps up my slideshow. And then I'm going to talk about something else. Okay, there we go. We're going to be organized just as we did this national sign-on letter, and it was a really good way. In fact, we had numerous groups come on because we were posting it on listservs, who signed on to that letter who didn't even know about Back from the Brink or hadn't endorsed the campaign yet. We want to do this in California. One of my really greatest frustrations is that I work at an organization that is got 15 people on it. It is an environmental justice organization. I'm the only person, me and Alex, part-time working on this issue. And yet even within our organization, we're sort of siloed, and we are so uniquely positioned. We are so uniquely positioned to break out of the silo and to do this intersectional organizing. And so this year I'm like, this is what I want to do. California is important. Just as the United States is important in the global stage on international issues, California is important on the national stage. We have taken leadership positions, whether it's fuel standards or whatnot, and we can do so on this issue too. So, but not with the people, not with our current size and ranks. So the first sort of volley in this intersectional outreach will be another sign-on letter to the California delegation from California groups. And this is something that even within, again, PSR-LA, we have relationships with dozens, if not hundreds of different kinds of environmental and social justice groups. We want them to sign on. We want this letter will focus more on the justice aspects of nuclear weapons and on the California that, San Francisco and Los Angeles have adopted resolutions, that the state has passed the resolutions, and this incredible role that we have in the nuclear industrial complex, whether it's, the weapons that are designed at Lawrence Livermore, the missiles that are tested off of Vandenberg, or, of course, the whole San Gabriel Valley pretty much is a Superfund site from Cold War production, not nuclear weapons, but other kinds of delivery systems. And so the hope with this effort is that in doing this outreach from folks that they know, and I will be reaching back out to you to get as many of us involved in this as possible, we will be bringing other groups and other movements, in making them informed of this and having a little bit of buy-in with the sign-on letter. This will greatly increase our power when we go and we have those in-district visits to show the kind of groups that have signed on. And also, I think it'll get us some different kinds of hand raisers for municipal resolutions, for for in-district visits. We met with another sort of case. So I'll use two. We met with Adam Schiff in 2019. There are two of our policy positions that no first use of nuclear weapons and restricting presidential authority are also represented in legislation before Congress are being reintroduced this year. I don't have the bill numbers, but I can send them. In 2019, we were asking NMSHIP to be a co-sponsor on a no first use legislation. And we were able to bring in really a diverse group of representatives. We had veterans, we had students, we had justice activists, we had doctors. And it was a really impactful meeting. And we want to try to do the same thing too with building diverse lobby teams that represent different types of constituents, whether it's age, whether it's the kinds of issues that folks are working on. It really gets attention, and so that's going to be rolling out in the next week or so. So with that, I will stop and have us start talking to each other.
Thank you. So raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or share a comment. Steve.
Thank you, Carol Francis, and thank you, Denise. Terrific presentation. We have most of our board on this screen, and I am calling an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors of ICUJP to do two things. To send a letter of support of House Resolution 77, and I've already been on your website, and you've got extraordinary materials and guidance for that, and to support your sign-on letter in California that you described in the second part of your presentation. So I will entertain a motion from a member of the Board of Directors for both of those initiatives. I see Carol Francis make the motion and Anthony seconded. We will have other discussion, but right now I'm asking for a vote of the Board of Directors on the pending motion. You can raise your hand or your electronic hand.
For the pending motion. Doc
Thank
Ruby
you.
here.
Good, I'm seeing yes votes. Hands up, there's Stephen Fisk, Anthony, Jasmine, Carol Francis. So that motion passes. We like to take action, Denise. We will follow up with you immediately after this on all of those issues. This goes to the heart of religious communities must stop blessing war and violence, which is our motto. So now I'm happy to have you go back to questions and answers.
Okay, Steve, so you're going to write the letter?
Yes, because there are such wonderful materials on the website, we can borrow and cut and paste for that.
Okay, great. Anthony. Anthony?
Oh,
Your
I just
hand-
wanted, yeah, thank you so much. And I just can't thank Denise enough for all your amazing work. Really impressive. I wondered how the meeting with Judy Chu went. Did she take a stand, or what was her response to your meeting?
She did, and there's two things I have to say that were sort of reinforced on this was the importance of having constituents there, being prepared and follow up. Can't really tell, so if you're in person and somebody's leaning in, it was a virtual meeting. So Alan Friedman, who is with our organization, began, because she had been, I'm sure you know, the sort of target of some horrible racist attacks. He began by talking about how his mother experienced similar when she came from Japan, and it just sort of was a lovely sort of introduction. It was personal. Dr. Bob Dodge, our board member, was there, as was I, and then Ed Fisher. We had Gloria from the American Society of Hiroshima and Nagasaki A-bomb survivors, was to be there, but was not able to join. So we had a fairly small group. at the end of the meeting, and I again, it was our part was all closed out by Ed Fisher from ICUJP, who did a fantastic job. And she said, well, I've signed on to other things. I don't see why I wouldn't support this. And it was over and it was maybe 20 minutes. It was very short. But Alon kept following up. So he would follow up and say, and this was before we had sent the 154 organization letter. So he sent that to her to show her the kind of groups that were supporting this. He followed up again in another week. Dr. Dodge, then sent another thank you for the meeting, and she did become a co-sponsor.
Wow, not surprised. She's always been very supportive, but I'm so glad that you did this because every vote counts. Thank you.
All right, Rick.
Denise, thank you very much for that, because it was very well laid out, not only the work of PSR, but back from the Brink, and it was really easy to follow what you guys are doing. I want to talk about one thing that what I found interesting a few years ago as a parallel is there were all of these people that were working on decriminalizing cannabis, right? And I really wasn't interested in it. I don't have the money to smoke, but they started to talk about the environmental and financial and aspects of the plant, how it was a fuel source, it was a great source for textile, all of this kind of stuff. And it brought in a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have been interested. And I think what's great with Back from the Brink is that you're talking about the obvious destructive issues of nuclear power, but there's also the aspect of, at this point in human society, nuclear energy is less effective and more dangerous than what's happening with wave energy, solar and wind energy. There are countries in Central Europe that put us to shame with how much of their power grid is tied into those forms of energy. So I think there's, not only the destructive aspects can be heightened, but also something with other alternative fuel organizations to talk about how it's so much more effective now. Fuel cells are almost to the point where it's as effective as photosynthesis in changing solar energy to fuel. So I just wanted to bring that aspect up.
Yeah, no, that is all true. And of course, we have now some environmental groups trying to support nuclear power as an answer to climate change. When folks bring questions like that to me, I often refer them to our allies, the Nuclear Information Resource Service, NIRS, which has just really, really good information on why that's not true.
Yeah. I think that's a very important aspect to cover both sides of that. So, but thank you very much for the presentation this morning.
Could you please repeat the name of the organization that you said, your sister organization that refutes?
Yes, I'm going to make sure I got it right. It's yes, it's Nuclear Information and Resource Service, and their website I will post in the chat.
Oh,
thank you.
Right now. And I have folks there that I can I can reach out to or connect you with if you can't find something or want somebody to talk sometime.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer.
Thanks, Denise, very much for coming here today and speaking to us. Your work is very important. And I have a question. Is there any efforts about outside the country, or are your efforts just mainly addressed to the US? like maybe China or Russia?
We are a US based effort. I would say that the international effort that is met, that would be would be ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. They have folks in every country, and really particularly need more of us involved because of the role the US plays on the world stage. But we're focused on US policy. Back from Brink is, yeah.
Okay, and the ban on nuclear weapons, is that going to be stages, or is that going to be stages that they're going to stop spending first before they start disarming or dismantling nuclear weapons? Because we have more than enough to destroy the world many times over.
Well, right now, the United States, of course, is not only not, and the other nuclear armed states are not only opposed to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, they actively try to block other countries. Australia was just going to send there's a meeting of state parties of the countries that have signed on, and they didn't even want Australia to send an observer. We have our that second meeting of state parties will be in New York this November, and there's going to be a lot of activity around that. But because the countries that have signed on are not countries that have nuclear weapons, there's nothing to dismantle. This treaty will become. It is, however, establishing a stigma and a norm, an international norm that really stigmatizes the possession and having that. So and it also, again, when one of this big hurdles we have is folks thinking that not knowing that there's a there with disarmament locally or globally, and so it's pretty powerful to tell folks that 2/3 of the world's countries would want this, but we need to get the nuclear armed states and those with under the umbrella to warm up to this treaty. There's a way that I think it's and in many ways it was the impetus for Back from the Brink to sort of create a pathway to it with our policy positions. And one other piece I was going to say there. I forgot what it was. It'll come back. But we have, and actually with HRS 77, I think for some of the congressional offices, the House offices that we've talked to, the fact that HRS 77 has the treaty in it is a non-starter for them because they don't want to cross the administration. So it is, so the folks that are signing on now, and more will, the more pressure we build, the more constituent power we can bring to bear, we will have more co-sponsors. But right now, it's an uphill climb, to say the least, when it comes to making the treaty operational for the countries that actually have the weapons.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Diane.
Steve, you talked about some of the local actions you're taking. And if you still live in Brentwood, we know now that with the redistricting, Sherman is now your representative. And I have contacted his office regarding this. I've asked him to be a co-sponsor, but I feel like I'm working as a silo. And so how do you and I connect, and how do I connect with maybe what you're doing so that I'm not working independently, that we're working together? So that's one thing I would like to say. The second thing, Denise, you talked about, you feel like you're working in silos with the Physicians for Social Responsibility. And because I'm a justice coordinator, I have many issues, and many of them seem so immediate that to try to get people involved in nuclear disarmament is difficult. So I'm in the process of developing a diagram to show the intersectionality. For instance, if we're talking about racism, well, we need to talk about nuclear disarmament because it affects racism. Talking about the climate, which is a big one right now. Mm-hmm. How does nuclear arms affect the climate? So we're trying to, so when I'm addressing some of these other issues, I'm trying to connect them to the issue of the fact that it's all interrelated, and nuclear arms affect the economy, poverty, health. I mean, all of these things are so interconnected, but because people get so focused on the one silo issue, they don't see that this is an important issue to address. And Steve, getting back to Brad Sherman, I've visited his office, I've written to him, I've asked him to be a co-sponsor. I've not met directly with him, but with the members of his office. So I think he's someone that apparently in the past has supported it, but now he's involved in many things, just as all the congresspersons are. But maybe somehow you, Steve, you and I could connect, or anyone else that's in his district, and see maybe how we can do some follow-up with him. So thank you very much.
And I definitely for Sherman, we work with him on the Santa Susana Field Laboratory. He's been pretty good on that. I don't know what it will take, an act of the universe to get that. So I actually was joking with my brother-in-law about whether we get Santa Susana cleaned up first or abolish nuclear weapons. And we agree that probably we'll abolish nuclear weapons first, but we do have relations with his office, and I can also do the same thing, build a diverse lobby team and meet with them. So I don't, we can small group that, but I would like to help with that. And I think, one of the, we could ask some Santa Susana community members to participate in that, who also have really good relationships with him, including, I don't know if you, anyway, there's a whole other story, but I'd like to help with that.
If I can jump in on the parts that were addressed to me, I think that, Diane, you work closely with Chris Panett. Chris is on our board, so that's your direct link. Ed Fisher at Veterans for Peace, Denise mentioned him. He's been very instrumental in our lobbying efforts, has Anthony and others on this screen. So offline, let's try to target key members of Congress throughout Southern California, reorganize the same kind of probably online lobby visits now that we have Resolution 77 in particular to focus on. And I'm thrilled by your activism and eagerness. So let's work on that separately.
Hello, I don't know how to raise my hand on the phone. Rosalio here.
Oh, Rosalio.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rosalio.
Yeah, well, in terms of a question or issue, I think we need to find the ways of approaching the labor in California and the different constituencies. And of course, yes, we have to. During the Iraq invasion and illegal war and all that, I helped organize, kind of spearheaded a Latinos for Peace group that lobbied basically the Latino caucus, or the Hispanic is what the, but, and we did a number of, got many of them on board on many of the key peace questions. So I'm considering trying to get some of that group, but we're all, in our 70s and 80s now from that came out of the Chicano moratorium cohort. But I'm very interested in helping on this. And if there's anybody that wants to, on 77 or related issues, meet with Congressman Gomez in the 34th District, I very much want to be part of that.
That's good. Denise, did you want to respond to that?
I couldn't agree more about labor and other, bringing in different constituencies. And I did not know that there was a Latino for Peace contingent that was working with Latino legislators.
We would have to reform.
That's so I put my email in, and I want to. For anybody who wants to take action on this in any way, whether you coordinate amongst yourself, but I would love to help any and all efforts. We have brochures I can get out to folks.
There's also a Blacks for Peace, a fairly new organization.
Yes, and Rosalio, I will join you on because Jimmy's my congressman, not advocating for that. So I was also interested. I think it's important that we talk about Trump rolling back the safety guidelines around the nuclear facilities. And I was also I think that Biden administration has to reinstate them because that's very important. And when we talk about intersectionality, we can't talk about nuclear and not talk about the waste of water that's used in the facilities. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because we had a speaker at a forum who was really, really good on the environmental issues. And I raised the question, what about the military? And he said, well, I really don't know that much about that. So that's something that we really need to bring up. And also I want to say, I'm also in Gomez's district, and I think it would really help if we had ICUJP regulars who want to be part of congressional meetings to know who's in whose district.
I wanted to make a comment and then ask a question, Denise. A few days ago, PBS ran an extraordinary documentary called The Movement and the Madman. I did not realize that during the Vietnam War, Nixon and Kissinger were attempting a strategy to threaten the use of nuclear weapons in North Vietnam and to portray Nixon as so trigger happy, and they called it the madman strategy. This was revealed years later through journalistic work and Freedom of Information Act. And it was huge public protests against Nixon and against the war, although they didn't know about the secret plans to use nuclear weapons at the time, that pushed Nixon back, and he withdrew those threats. Unfortunately, the war lasted many more years, as virtually everybody on this screen knows and was involved in protesting. But I wanted, people can go to PBS, The Movement and the Madman on American Experience. It was very revealing, but it was particularly revealing on the power of protest to directly influence public policy. So I wanted to turn back to Denise, because we have a little bit of time, to ask you, in our lobbying and in our own personal relations with family and friends and over the dinner table, what are the best talking points to get across to people that this is an immediate, serious threat, that you have to care about this as much as you care about other issues, if not more than many of the dog whistle issues we hear about today, and just the kinds of arguments that we can make at lobbying visits as well as in our own personal contacts to get across the immediacy of this problem.
You know, it really in some ways depends on who you're talking to, what points, you know, matter more. With a lot of our social justice groups, when we talk about the environmental justice and the racial justice aspects of nuclear weapons, they lean in. For other folks, just talking about the money. I mean, it is sinful. I forget, I don't have the number in front of me, but like how much we spend per minute, 2 billion, 2 million, it's a lot. For other folks, like that sort of causes them, particularly when we say we're spending this money on weapons that cannot be used. They must not be used, and deterrence is a fallacy. Just as you mentioned with what happened with Nixon and threats to China for nuclear weapons, we've had so many, like that did not happen, but there have been so many near misses, miscalculations. These are machines that are built by human beings. They have technical breakdowns. Human beings are fallible in terms of interpreting threats. We've had so many of these times. So sometimes talking to people about just that, like, you may not see or feel this, but you know, we also have hacking, you know, now, like there are so many other ways besides an intentional threat. So it really tends to depend on the person. And I if you see someone, you know, doing this like it's not working, if you see someone doing like this, leaning in a little bit, like then you have their attention. But boy, you know, and for us, we're working with doctors, of course, we're talking always about health aspects. I wish that there was, you know, there was one thing or even a handful of things that by themselves like cause people to move to action. But I think, like you're right, people are just, they've got a lot of other things on their going on right now. There's a lot of other issues, but we won't have a chance to address those issues if we are not here, if there is nuclear war. And so, you know, that's the best that I can say. I get frustrated sometimes that I have to talk about other issues. I'm like, why isn't it just enough that something that makes everybody die? Oh, isn't that enough? But it isn't, not in the world we live in now.
Yeah, intersectionality is so important. Jennifer, your hand is up. Did you raise it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I talk?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, Denise. I was wondering, people in Hollywood like Michael Douglas have, you know, I mean, he's appointed as a UN messenger of peace, and he says on his bio that he's fiercely committed to halting or banning nuclear weapons. Have your organization worked with him? There's like at least so many Hollywood people now listed as a UN messenger of peace. You know, I'm not trying to like promote a celebrity culture.
No, we just had this conversation yesterday, as a matter of fact. I mean, we are back from the brink, I should say another thing, which is both got a positive and a negative, but we're largely volunteer driven. You know, even a lot of the work that I do on it, I'm doing it on my own time. So we have like these tiers of things we want to do. And yesterday we like sort of had in our parking lot, if you will, or whatever the phrase is, like the whole celebrity thing. And that sort of came back because we want to do a sort of a prominent person's sign-on letter on HRS 77 too. So Michael Douglas.
So there's like so many of them. Leonardo Capricci is the UN messenger of peace. Charlene Theron and Stevie Wonder, Yo-Yo Ma, and all these people.
Oh, I did not think about that ambassadorship. This is great. I mean, I always, you know, whenever I go places, I hope I get good information and ideas, but UN ambassadors, I did not think about that. I was just Googling the other day who's speaking out on Ukraine, but I think this is an even better list. Thank you.
And I think that you know, does your organization send speakers like to churches and local groups and to speak on this issue? Because we have to make it a popular movement. It cannot be the congressional representative thinking it's a good idea. They have to do it. Otherwise, their constituents are calling them. It has to be a popular movement. Does your organization send speakers to speak?
We have speakers. We have speakers. Dr. Ira Helfand is one of our powerful ones. I speak. We will. PSR-LA has speakers. But you just touched on something that I think is really great to talk about now that we talked about with Archbishop Wester of Santa Fe and with his office and with the Interfaith Gathering, which is, we have back from the brink is the Methodist Church and Episcopal Church. Protestant. I mean, we have the North American Islamic Society. We have these relationships now, and one conversation we're having in there is, how does this get to the faithful? Like it's great to have this leadership from faith leaders. Participation in all of this is huge. But there's this other sort of part of it, which is, how do these messages come from the faith leaders who've signed on, or the religious institutions or bodies of religious institutions? How does this sort of get disseminated to the faithful to start to build that? And not all institutions, have regular speakers come in, but it is. One of the major topics of discussion, because again, like the moral voice, the faith voice, one of, if not most powerful argument against nuclear weapons, but really building that out within the faithful, it remains sort of a challenge.
Thank you very much. I'll be contacting you.
That's great. And I just wanted to say, if anybody is looking for children's books about war and peace, I've got a whole bunch that I can recommend as a retired teacher. Also, there are three of us who said we're from Gomez's office. If there's anybody else who wants to work on doing congressional visits on the issue.
PSR-LA is in his, our office is in his district too.
Oh, that's great.
Our downtown office, yeah.
All right, let us let us know who your congressperson is. Put it in the chat. All right, that's it. I don't see any more hands up. So
Let me say this to add on, Carol Francis, because we always, the chat, I know you can save the chat, but anyone who is interested, you got a message today from Rick Bañales and as our communications director. So in addition to putting anything in the chat, just email Rick that you are interested in being part of a delegation. And these days, those generally are on Zoom, although more and more face-to-face meetings are beginning to emerge. Because I think with Ed Fisher, Anthony, Carol Francis, several of us, Chris now and Diane, I think we can make a robust effort in the next 60 to 90 days to actively lobby congresspersons and senators in Southern California and California. I think we are built for this. Denise has given us all the materials to support that effort. Denise, of course, would be part of planning these delegations, and she may bring in people that are not directly associated with ICUJP, which is great. The best delegations I've been on have always brought in a variety and diverse people from, and especially constituents in each of the districts. That matters a lot. So let's make this a strong initiative. Rick has put in the chat communications@icujp.org. Anyone tentatively interested in these delegations, let's do this work. Let's not just talk the talk. Let's walk the walk. Let's do the heavy lifting. It's hardly heavy to go on a couple Zoom meetings, because if we can build that kind of California presence and have a California delegation and a vast number of California representatives do this, that itself can be a model for other states. It can reinvigorate what Denise is doing elsewhere, as well as PSR. So let's take advantage of this, and we are pledged, Denise, to
Wonderful.
continue to work on this.
And just one thing, we don't yet have a Senate companion bill, but that will be, so we're focusing on House members now, but we hope to have a Senate companion bill, and I will let you know once we do.
Jane, one of the people who didn't quite get a chance to introduce yourself, you have a message in the chat about the South Coast Interfaith
Wonderful.
Council. Would you like
sorry,
to?
I was late. Yeah, so I can bring it up to them. I'm not on their board, but I can bring it up with them, and I'm happy to be part of a delegation to Ted Lieu's office. I'm not all that optimistic, but I also think it would be great to get it as an issue in the Senate campaign, even though nationally there's not a campaign.
Yes.
You know, it's so nice to have Barbara on the signing on already, and that would be great to hold the other candidates accountable.
Absolutely. Yep.
I put in the chat the Death Penalty Focus annual awards dinner is returning to an in-person event at the Skirball Cultural Center on May 4, Thursday, May 4 at 6 p.m. We'll be honoring Paula Mitchell, of the LA Innocence Project, along with Andy Wilson and Maurice Hastings, exonerees who've supported that center. We're honoring Diane Russ Tierney, the head of the national campaign to end the death penalty, and Elizabeth Bruning of the Atlantic magazine for her journalism exposing the flaws in the death penalty. There is a surprise honoree that is in the last stages of being confirmed. This is a great chance for people to support Death Penalty Focus to end the death penalty in California once and for all. You'll be getting more specific save the dates and other announcements. The link is in the chat right now. Thanks, everybody.
All right, Anthony?
So first I want to say how happy I am to see Jane here. Makes me smile. Thank you for joining us. Brings back great memories. I just put in the chat an announcement about the Housing Justice Forum for San Gabriel Valley that's going to take place tomorrow. And just on a personal note, Palm Sunday is the anniversary when Jill and I met at the Palm Sunday Peace Parade here in Pasadena 12 years ago. So I'm just feeling a very celebratory mood right now. So that's my announcements.
Right. No, I see no more hands.
If I can just say that link that Anthony set up, if you're not on the mailing list for Making Housing and Community Happen, there's some great resources about different things that not only his organization is doing, but other symposiums and things like that happening in Los Angeles around and in the country around housing reform and housing justice. So that's my unbiased opinion, and hopefully everybody can join in on that.
Amen, Ashe.
Amen. Thank you, Carol Francis, for facilitating, and thank you, Anthony, for your wonderful reflection. Denise, thank you so much. You wake up every morning doing this work. We are so grateful. We stand shoulder to shoulder with you, and we thank you. Rick, what's our plan for next Friday Forum?
Right.
Next week, this is somebody that Anthony brought to our attention, Jose Was from the Friends Committee for National Legislation. And it should prove to be a very informative forum, because there's so much that FCNL is working on, and a lot of things that ICUJP as a whole and as members can be involved with. So please join us next week, and you'll get the information the same way you got information on this forum here.